Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Let's call the February 27th, 2018 Santa Barbara City Council meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Dominguez? Mayor Pro Tem Rouse? Mayor Maria?
Here.
And Councilmember Snedden? Here. And Councilmember Hart is not present.
Okay, very good. Mr. City Administrator, any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item 19, we would like to recommend pulling the appeal and rescheduling it at a later date. The item is the appeal of Planning Commission approval of a coastal development permit for landscape changes at 1909 El Camino de la Luz. We've got new information just in the last day or so that staff would like additional time to be able to be responsive to, and so we'd recommend pulling the item for today, and we'll reschedule it shortly.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment in that case. Bryce Picton is first with the California Public Interest Research Group. You'll be followed by Mary Delight Schuetz and then Pete Del Bello. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bryce Picton, and I am an intern at the organization CalPIRG at UCSB. CalPIRG is a statewide student-directed and funded nonprofit which works to protect the environment and promote civic engagement. We are currently working on a campaign to stop oil drilling in the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon is the world's largest source of biodiversity and plays a critical role in the stabilization of the global climate. Unfortunately, over 20,000 square miles of Amazon rainforest are being lost every year, and over 20% of the rainforest is already gone. Here in California, we import roughly half of Amazon crude oil exports, and because of this, we are driving the expansion of oil drilling in the Amazon, leading to companies ignoring standard drilling practices. And we want this important issue to be in the public eye, and are proposing a ban of the import of Amazon crude oil in California. To begin, we are asking individual cities to pass a resolution in support of this statewide ban. Santa Cruz has already passed this resolution, and we would love Santa Barbara to be the next. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Mary Delight Schuetz, come on up.
Thank you all. Thank you all for everything you do for our community. I'm here today because for several months now, the MTD, the Metropolitan Transit District, has been running an ad on their buses that says relax, just the word relax, for months upon end in Carpinteria, Santa Barbara, Isla Vista, and Goleta. Well, come later on in February, we see this ad in the Independent that says, relax, we only grow organic. I think there is a correlation because I may know this girl, and she also tells me not only to take marijuana, but she tells me personally that I need crystal meth. I am vehemently opposed for the next 7 generations and the next 1,000 generations, for our children, our future, and for humanity. I'm vehemently opposed to any and all drugs and meds, both illegal and legal. And this ad is promoting Cal Green Medical in Goleta, and they say Goleta is the good land, but now it's become the bad lands at 164 Ario Camino in Goleta because of this pot clinic. I'm vehemently opposed against marijuana and also crystal meth and methamphetamine because of the senseless deaths, especially for children, because they won't have a future. And I want to say there might be a correlation between the bus and this ad, and I don't agree with it. And I hope that we can shut down meth and marijuana worldwide and all drugs worldwide for all of us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Pete Del Bello, Michael Miranda, and Jose Gallegos are giving you their time. So you have 6 minutes. And you'll be followed by Juan Ayala, followed by
I have some
John Jeffries.
some material to
Good.
give the mayor and council, and if you could make sure that Councilman Hart gets it. I know he's not here, but just unfortunately he's going to miss something exciting. And
Go ahead.
okay, Madam Mayor and City Council, my name is Pete Del Bello, and I'm a Santa Barbara native. Councilman Friedman, you will be happy to know that Trader Joe's has the best marinated artichoke hearts in town. I mean that. I'm a connoisseur of artichoke hearts, And unfortunately for me, it's only a short walk to the Melpis location, so I don't have to, there's not any additional crunch on parking. And as I mentioned, this is fortunate because parking is such a problem at the Melpis Trader Joe's that this sign, which I provided for all of you, says the following: if you walk off this property, your vehicle will be towed immediately at your expense. Store management and security guards tell me that their biggest problems are people parking in their lot since they can't find anywhere to park in their neighborhood. Another problem is obviously the homeless situation. And also remember, one of the major concerns about Ryan Howell's marijuana dispensary at 118 North Melpis Street is parking. The dispensary is limited to 150 customers a day. Where are they going to park? The parking on Melpis is so bad that many people park on a little-known street behind the 100 block of North Melpis called Juana Maria Avenue. And I bet 95% of the city's never heard of Juana Maria because it's only 1 block long. I own property there too. It's where my mother grew up. And here's a picture that shows you how bad the parking is on Juana Maria on both sides. And I know this is years ago. My mother, who's up in heaven, she died a year ago today, she actually used to play ball in that street. That shows how there was no cars back then. And now you can only imagine how frustrated she would be to see how complicated the parking situation has gotten for everybody. And the parking is already impacted, as you saw, on both sides. So it is impossible for 2 cars to pass each other in the middle of the street. So it's basically like a one-way street already. And I see this, I'm there every day, so I see this every day. And when I had to put a dumpster in front of the property to do some work, the driveway's too narrow, so I had to put it out in the street. And then actually, since I put it on the street, I had to get a permit. So we had to bring the dumpster. I had an agreement with the city of Marburg. Let's bring the dumpster on a Tuesday because the street sweeping on that side of the street is on Tuesday. So we make sure that, and then they had to be there picked up on a Tuesday. So more money spent, more permits, all because of the parking. And a friend of mine from Ventura, he didn't know we have a parking problem over there. And I told him, no, that's all right. So he couldn't find parking on Melpis or Juana Maria, so he parked on Alisos, the block right behind Juana Maria. And he actually double parked. He didn't realize, I told him, don't worry about it, just don't do it again, as people are upset. And so this was left on his windshield in both English and Spanish because he was double parked. And so I told him, just be careful, as people are upset about things, especially parking in this area. So though residential parking is a major issue throughout the city, on the west side, many people are blocking the street parking. Late at night, people are parking in red curb areas. It is hard for people to back out of their driveways, which is also among the parking concerns they have on Juana Maria. When I back out, determining on how I go, if I go this way or this way, all determines on how the cars are parked in the street. And God help us if the car is blocking the driveway across from me, otherwise that makes it even harder. So it's important to realize that Santa Barbara has not known growth in square footage in my lifetime as a city, but it has obviously shown tremendous growth in population. So, and I know naturally you've heard me talk over and over about Ryan Howell's dispensary, and it's going to be going before the Planning Commission on April 5th. And it hasn't been confirmed yet, but that's what it looks like. When it is confirmed, of course, I'll let everybody know. And I hope the Planning Commission finally realizes that Mr. Howe is a bad actor in this industry, and he's making this marijuana industry look bad, especially at a time when they're trying to build more credibility. So that's something to think about. So remember parking. As I told Jim Worthen on his TV show last week, this city is just a total failure when it comes to parking. And then on top of that, they're taking parking away. It's incredible. God help Santa Barbara. Thank you for your time and kind attention.
Very good. Juan Ayala, you're next. Come on up. John Jeffries to follow you, and then Peter Marin.
Thank you. Greetings to each and all. I was just looking at the flag while the pledge was going on, and I noticed the eagle is there. And, in the Tree of Peace Society and Tree of Peace of the Iroquois people, the eagle is the guardian of the Tree of Peace. And so the understanding was that the Tree of Life is the same as the Tree of Knowledge and the Tree of Peace, which the Hopi explain as the original instructions, the nature of peace, harmony, peace among all peoples, and harmony with nature. This is the way that humans were intended to live. But unfortunately, somewhere along the line of civilization's development, the development of knowledge, tools, technology, etc., tools became weapons. And as Buckminster Fuller said, it is now time to turn all weaponry into livingry, because without peace we cannot survive. All the resources go to wars instead of going to take care of the communities which the children will need to live in. So we've been very active in promoting the Tree of Peace planting, the Tree of Peace Society. We planted one of those trees at UCSB many years ago when I was a young student there. It still exists in front of Stork Tower. And today I come to thank Mayor Murillo for accepting the invitation to support this ceremony and participate in it. I hope all of you will be able to attend. This is an invitation to all humans in this world to remember that only peace can guarantee our survival. Not military, not wars. That's not possible. The wars are destroying the world, consuming oil, producing pollution, and so on. And, this is man-made disasters. War are not the product of nature. So we appeal to you as human beings and for the future of Santa Barbara, that Santa Barbara should not rely on war industries, but be a city of light, a city of peace.
Thank you.
An example to the world.
Thank you, Mr. Ayala.
Thank you very much.
Your ceremony is on Sunday, March 11th,
Yes,
1 p.m. near Stork Tower.
Yes,
on
and
UCSB.
on March 6th, there are going to be gatherings in Carpinteria also to initiate community councils to discuss all issues pertaining to peace and
Thank you so
development.
much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your kind attention.
Mr. Jeffries, followed by Peter Marin, followed by Tom Widrow. Welcome,
Well,
sir.
hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. It's an honor to speak before you. You're the fourth mayor I've spoken in front of, and I've been here for quite a long time. I'm here for no other reason but to thank the city of Santa Barbara on behalf of the residents of Pilgrim Terrace Cooperative Homes and all who live there. We're right across from La Cumbre Middle School. We're on your agenda today. In 1980, the city of Santa Barbara donated 9.3 acres for the proposed building of affordable housing community for 62 plus and or disabled of very, very low income. That's 30% of the median. After 20 years of questionable management practices by management companies from none other than Los Angeles, I was hired to help the unhappy residents there and try to bring Santa Barbara's wisdom back to fruition. I went to the city of Santa Barbara with 20 years of deferred maintenance problems, accessibility issues that were a nightmare. Again, city representatives listened and responded. People like Stephen Falstich, Carol Carpenter, Sue Gray, Harriet Miller, and Marty Bloom, all along with the current city council at that time, granted us the single largest grant to one property in the history of Santa Barbara. That's two for you. Once you donated the land, and now you helped us rehabilitate the property because the insight was there. I have been taking care of your good work, and we're among the highest rated affordable housing properties in the United States. I don't know if you know about inspections, but inspections are out of 100. We've gotten no less than 90 on any inspection since this time. I want to invite each and every single one of you to visit our property, because what we've done is we've developed a model to assure that our residents receive not just a place to live, but we're developing a thriving community.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please come and visit.
very good. Mr. Marin, Catherine Marin is giving you her time. You'll have 4 minutes.
When I was here 3 weeks ago, Mayor, you suggested that I get in touch with Ariel Cologne concerning the RV ban and the possibility of revising it before we went to court. On February 14th, I wrote my first email to him. We couldn't make a real connection till last Wednesday when he asked me to tell him what time I'd like to come in. I responded at 3 o'clock on Friday. That's the last we've communicated. So a week has gone by since then. I haven't been able to talk to him. I'm not here to complain about that. What I really want to draw your attention to is the fact that you ought not to be passing the buck to him. This is a ban that was passed by the City Council. When it was last considered by this council, 2 of you, the mayor and Greg Hart, voted against it. 2 of you voted for it. But sitting on this 6-person council now, or 7 if there are 7, are only 2 people who supported that ban. I should add that the mayor who voted against the ban was elected as mayor. French Hotchkiss, who pushed the ban, was not elected mayor. Whether that tells us something about the feeling in the city or the political viability of the ban or what it would cost to actually take a stand against it is not clear to me. But I think at this point, given the facts of the case and the fact that when this goes to court, the city will be liable, in theory, if we are correct in our theory, for its behavior towards RVs and the unconstitutional and illegal taking of property going back for years. There's a history to all of this, with those of you who are new to the council do not, I think, understand. It goes back at least to 2005. We feel in that period of time, the city, long before Mr. Cologne or the new chief of police appeared, continually violated the rights of vehicle owners, including car owners, not just RV owners. We think this is a very serious business when it gets to court. I will remind you that in Fresno, the city had to settle a case for $2 million for the illegal destruction of homeless property. And in that instance, it was tents and clothing. It was not anything like vehicles. This is really a serious business, and I don't believe you're taking it as seriously as you should. Perhaps you have consulted with Mr. Cologne, and he has told you that all of this is okay. I don't know. What I do remember is that when he first presented the possibility of this ban to the council at the council's request, he pointed out that there were several gray areas in the law where he could not tell you what was likely to happen if this went to court. Those gray areas persist. Recently, as you may know, courts have increasingly broken with municipalities and sided with the indigent and the poor against laws made in municipalities. If this goes to court, I think you are in serious jeopardy. I'm not saying that would happen. I think it might happen. And the fact that you will not discuss this before this goes to courts is unbelievable to me. Finally, let me say this. 6 of you, of the 6 of you, 5 of you I know are affiliated with the Democratic Party. Some of you are liberals, a few are progressives. And the fact that you are treating the indigent and the poor in the city, aside from the risk to the city, seems to me inconceivable. You ought to pay attention to your own politics when it comes to the poor in the city and act differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marin. Tom Woodrow, followed by Phil Walker, and then Kate Schwab.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tom Woodrow here. I come up here now and again on behalf of a client of mine, Ken Descent, and I also, on behalf of a watchdog group called Santa Barbara City Watch today, I represent Santa Barbara City Watch. We had a meeting the other day, and someone brought up the fact, there was an article that I sent to some of you, talked about how my home area, particularly San Francisco, has descended into a real serious problem and a real threat to their $10 billion tourist industry, which is how they're managing the homeless situation up there. It's not going well. They talk about thousands of pounds of needles and feces, and it's a terrible situation. It's only growing and getting worse. And so some folks on our committee said, hey, we have our own problems that way. We have our own challenges in trying to take care of those who are mentally ill, drug-addled, and who are also, really occupying the public spaces at the expense of tourists, citizens, and businesses. So I did want to bring to your attention, there is a bill at the state level that leads me to believe there's some hope. I'll send you this article. It's a bill that aims to make it easier to commit homeless in need of psychiatric help. And that actually was supported unanimously by the county of San Francisco. So I know it's a more liberal jurisdiction, and people have been reticent to do that. But there had to be some way of taking people who are at risk to themselves, at risk to others, or gravely disabled. There had to be some way to get them into treatment. And I believe that this bill that's going before up in Sacramento is probably a good vehicle. So I'll send it to all of you, and if it looks like worthy of getting behind our state assembly persons, it might really help us be able to fix State Street. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, come on up. Kate Schwab after you, Dave Lombardi after.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. It rained a little bit last night, but you had to stretch it to call it a trace. But the week before, Monday overnight into Tuesday morning, it rained fronds, Washingtonia robusta, and there needs, I picked up a pile at least up to my shoulders and got them out of the street and front of they were sort of temporarily impeding access to the condos across the street from me. And they're hard on the tires too, and people don't realize that, but there needs to be some method to the madness of just letting them hit and the residents pick them up. But I called City Parks Trees Department, and they got right on it. The pile was removed the next day. They're good, but they're stretched thin. And one other quick thing, crystal meth ain't no good. And you remember the old saying, I'm sure Mr. Councilman Rouse does, several people here, speed kills. But at El Estero, probably late August 2016, just a few months before I retired, everything clicked. We had a fellow, a transient, he was sort of semi-ODing and slicing at his carotid area with a box cutter, and he had admitted to the responding paramedics that crystal meth was involved, and he also was self-medicating on ketamine, the animal tranquilizer, trying to come down. So he everything clicked. The fire department responded very quickly, the AMR, and I think one or two black and white units, and they saved him, but it was touch and go, and it's a good thing to see happen right before you retire. Sometimes good things do happen. Thank you. Remember, speed kills.
Thank you. Kate Schwab, come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Kate Schwab. I'm the Marketing Communications Director for Downtown Santa Barbara, and I'm just here to share the news of our fabulous Downtown Santa Barbara Annual Awards Breakfast presented by Southern California Edison. I know most of you were there. Thank you so much for being there. Our Harriet Miller Youth Leadership Award was presented by Union Bank to Leila Lenderos of San Marcos High School. Every year we find an amazing high school student to give this award to. I think you all agree that Leila was an exceptional award winner. Our 2017 Business Champion of the Year went to Tony Arroyos, the owner of Los Arroyos Restaurants, for his work during the Thomas Fire and subsequent debris flow. Our 2017 George Girth Volunteer of the Year Award went to Tracy Tate of the Tobes Group. The Richard Breza Excellence in Public Service Award, an award we give really rarely, the last time, of course, Dave Gustafson, went to Ginny Brush of the County Arts Commission. And our Citizen of the Year, how could it be anyone else? The Santa Barbara City Fire Chief, Pat McElroy. So thanks again for supporting us and coming to our breakfast, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Schwab, come on back. Mr. Dominguez, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
So I see up here, first Thursday is this Thursday. Are there any highlights you'd like to share with us?
Well, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, actually, Dave Lombardi is going to speak to that.
Okay,
But
great.
you all have a passport, so we'll see you Thursday night.
Thank you. Mr. Lombardi, come on up. You'll be followed by Sharon Byrne, Thorne Robertson, Paulina Khan. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Dave Lombardi. I'm interim executive director for downtown Santa Barbara. And in front of you, you have the First Thursday Passports, which is the kickoff for Puppet Palooza. This is a 4-day event that's going to be fantastic. We're going to have puppets up and down State Street, in and out of stores, all through the city of Santa Barbara. We're going to have the Muppets out at Marjorie Luke Theater, and just a bunch of great events that are going to be happening all over the weekend, but being kicked off Thursday afternoon starting at 5 o'clock right out here in De La Guerra Plaza. Thanks to the help with the police and the city and Public Works, we have closed down some of the street. We're going to have a nice big block party. We're going to have a lot of the merchants that have the stores right along there are going to come out onto the street and bring some of the wares out. We have some of the area restaurants coming in, and we're going to have tables set up all and down through Paseo Nuevo. So we really encourage the city, of course all of you are invited, and the kids and everybody to come down and see this great, fabulous event that we're going to have. And again, it's kicking off first Thursday with Puppet Palooza. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Byrne, come on up.
Wow, nice job, Lombardi. Appreciate that. All right. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Sharon Byrne. I'm the executive director of the Coast Village Association. I'm actually here just to say thank you. We went through a lot in early January, and I think in all the things that have ensued, I don't think we've done a proper job thanking you for what you did, and some things you may know about, some things you may not. So if you'll just indulge me. Councilwoman Snedden, thank you very much for turning up and for really wanting to be there, for working in the Coast Village Recovery Center, much appreciated, and for understanding the traffic situation that we faced and really helping push that along. Mayor Murillo, thank you very much for coming to the Cash Mob. Appreciate that. But you may not know what your staff did in the wake of the disaster. The day of the mudslide, Rebecca Bjork called us at about 4 o'clock that night and said, we're going to do whatever we have to do to get your road open. We're going to put in bulldozers. We're going to clean the street of mud. And if you remember, it was pretty much a huge mess. At the same time, we had a conversation with George Buell a couple days later, and he said, hey, you've got some yellow tag buildings. People aren't going to be able to reoccupy them. And the city's permitting process for reoccupancy could be little onerous, sorry. And so he offered to have an inspector turn up on Coast Village to help guide the business owners trying to reoccupy their buildings as to precisely what they would need to do, which is a tremendous level of service. Through the police department, we were able to schedule barricade access late at night and then also on a Saturday to get the gas back on and for people to check what was going on in their business and get insurance papers and things that they would need to file claims. I don't know if you know, but Wojo came briefly back out of retirement to work that project, and he and Dan McGrew did a great job helping shepherd us through that process, as well as coordinating with an awful lot of cops from Tulare and Kern County and all kinds of places that were actually manning those barricades and who were pretty strict, I have to say. But I just want to say thank you because I don't know if you were aware how much the city staff really went to the mat to try to get us open back up and how much we really appreciate that. Thank you.
And thank you for the good job that you did, Ms. Byrne. Thank you. We're at 30 minutes, but I think we can get through the rest of public comment.
I'll be 45 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Robertson, go ahead.
Yeah, Thorne Robertson, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm on the board of directors of Coast Village Association and also part of our Traffic and Safety Committee. And I also want to extend a big thank you to Public Works members, Rob Dayton, Derek Bailey, and Rebecca Bjork, for their very prompt response to our concerns about some of the traffic safety issues on Coast Village Road. Specifically, a lot of cars have been speeding down the parking aisle that parallels the median. And so the city was able to put up some stop signs there. They also put up a barrier so that it discourages cars and trucks from speeding down that aisle. They also put up all-way stop signs at the two intersections of Coast Village Circle and Coast Village Road. previously it was virtually impossible and definitely dangerous trying to get out of Coast Village Circle onto Coast Village Road. Now it can be done safely. Also, in the middle of the 1100 block, they put up additional signage for the crosswalk to alert cars to look out for pedestrians. So, again, just a big thank you to Rob, Derek, and Rebecca. Thanks.
Right, and you're welcome, and thank you. Paulina Kahn, Anna Marie Gott, and Mitchell Kriegman, you'll be the final speaker.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Paulina Kahn. On December 12th, I came to present the nomination document for the corridor in front of the Mission to Foothill Road. It's 480 pages. Today, I would like to present to you a cue sheet, which is only 2 pages. It goes with the document, so if there are certain sections you want to see, you can check this and you'll get it very quickly. I also am here to again request that you return the federal bridge grant taxpayer funds for the historic landmark structurally sound Mission Creek Bridge, structure number 51C0051. The community did not want this bridge touched. The scenic corridor is statistically one of the safest. Your own transportation department recommended that these funds be returned. And so it was the other city council that voted to keep these funds. I am asking you to return the funds. Slowing down traffic is the biggest, well, this is a safe corridor, and it's safe because traffic is slow and everybody watches out for everyone. So I guess I will quote Mr. Walker, speed kills. And any realignment of the road will not only destroy historic landmarks, but it will also increase speed and cause more accidents. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms. Kahn. Ms. Gott?
Let's see, this is for... I give it to you?
City Council. Last night I attended an ABR meeting. That meeting discussed the possibility of having a home turned into a 3-unit short-term vacation rental with 2 parking places. They were allowed to reduce their parking because the home is within the central business district. They received a zone of benefit parking reduction, which means they don't have to provide adequate parking for the number of people or the number of bedrooms at this home. There's actually a number of homes that have already been permitted as short-term vacation rentals, some of them actually permitted in error. As an example of what the parking situation is like, 402 Anacapa would require, if it was permitted, 2 parking places, but it advertises that it accommodates 11 people. 513 Santa Barbara Street says that it has 1 bedroom. It actually, again, I believe was permitted in error. It provides 1 parking place, but has an advertisement that says it accommodates 6. The owner actually tells people that where to park on the street so they can avoid parking in the parking structure, which would cost them $22 to $26 a day. 109 West Ortega has 2 parking places. They actually accommodate 10 people. All of these have been permitted, all of them without enough parking that is actually going to be required to park the residents or guests who are actually staying in these homes. And they are not being directed to park in the public parking. They're not being charged to park in the public parking structures, but they are instead being directed and are parking in the residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks. Mitchell Kriegman, come on up.
Thank you for having me here. Nice to see you guys. So this is the time that the puppets come to Santa Barbara. I think you already know Puppet Palooza starts on Thursday with First Thursday and the generous help of downtown Santa Barbara. What you may not know is it's also coming to Macy's. The puppets are invading Macy's as well. What's happened is that, as you might have noticed in the weather forecast, that the weather on our 4 days, especially during our outdoor events, ain't going to be so great, or may not be so great. And we could not put families and children in that kind of jeopardy, and I don't think they'd come anyway. So we made some radical changes with the help of Paseo Nuevo in 2 days, and we are opening up Macy's. And we will have puppets invading Macy's, as well as all of Paseo, and Alacama Theater. And it's going to be amazing. The Muppets are going to be at Marjorie Luke. All kinds of, we're doing a celebration of families with El Latino and Radio Bronco. We're doing everything we can. And it's all happening now. And I just want everybody to know we're very privileged to have Snook, the Echo Sloth, be meeting with the mayor tomorrow, I think, and having that honor. And we're going to be on KUIT doing the weather with puppets. And I could go on. But I only have 2 minutes. So I just want everybody to know, I want you to know that in this world where we've had a really rough time with winters and we're rebuilding structures, that Puppet Palooza is here to rebuild joy and laughter and for fun and to make Santa Barbara a destination city for great, fun stuff. There you go.
Don't go away. There's some lights on. But I did want to say it's puppetpaloozasb.com for
Right.
people who want to look at the changes that you're
Yes.
making for those families that want something to do with their kids, right?
And for tickets.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Friedman and then Mr. Dominguez.
Well, first I just want to thank you, Mitchell. Mitchell and I met about a year ago, and we were having coffee. We'd never met each other before, and it just come up, and we started talking, and he brought this idea of Puppet Palooza to me at the time. He's been talking to other people, but he mentioned it to me, and it was a pie-in-the-sky dream, and he brought it to fruition in basically 1 year, went out, and he's the reason that we're having this. It's his dream, and I want to congratulate you for having this vision and going out and getting it done, and it's been great to see that process through, and to see where we were a year ago when we were having coffee, and it was just drawn on a napkin what you wanted, and to see it here, it's amazing, and thank you so much for bringing this to our community, Mitchell.
Well, thank you. I just really want to do something great for Santa Barbara, and it's sort of what I do in TV and film and everything else, so that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Mr. Dominguez.
I just want to double down on Mr. Friedman's comments. This is great timing. You know, we had the film festival, which helped bring us out of the winter doldrums, and this is following on its tail. So this is just great. I think this is hopefully going to be an instant classic for Santa Barbara, and I'm really excited to see it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we're really hoping that Macy's will get everybody's attention. So tell everybody you can. If you want to see what Macy's looks like inside right now, it's pretty cool.
Good. Yeah, that'll be a benefit. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for letting me talk.
Okay, very
see
good.
ya.
So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Are there items to read, Madam Clerk?
Yes, there are. Item 2, resolution adopting United States Bureau of Reclamation Contract Compliance Report. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting a water management plan and authorizing the Public Works Director to transmit the plan to the United States Bureau of Reclamation in accordance with contract requirements for receiving Cachuma water supplies. Item 3, authorize representatives for the Cachuma contract process. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing representatives to participate and negotiate in contracting sessions for the 2020 Cachuma Project Water Service Contract with United States Bureau of Reclamation. And item 4, Public Works Engineering Services position changes to support City Police Station Replacement Project. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution 17060, the position and salary control resolution for fiscal year 2018, affecting the Public Works Department effective March 3rd, 2018.
Thank you. Ms. Snedden wants to pull the minutes, which is item number 1. Go ahead, Ms. Snedden.
I just had 2 things. One, I was not present for the December 12th meeting, so I will want to pull that separate to vote on. And then on January 23rd minutes, somewhere in there it says Mayor Schneider was residing over the recess, which I think is probably an error.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the December 12th minutes? Okay. Okay. And so Mr. Friedman has to abstain on
Yeah,
that one.
I'll
as
be
well.
abstaining as well.
Okay. So those of us who can vote, aye.
Madam Mayor, you'll need 4 votes for any resolutions or ordinances, 3 for the minutes. As a majority of those present is fine.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the December 12th minutes. All in favor? Aye. And 2 abstentions up here. Okay. And we're asking for correction on the January 23rd minutes that refer to our esteemed former mayor, Schneider, and she was gone. So with that change, do we have a motion for the remainder of the minutes? Mr. Dominguez, a second from Mr. Rouse. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. And Mr. Dominguez wants to pull number 11, and we also have a speaker, Mr. Widrow, wants to speak on that. Would you read the item, Madam Clerk?
Item 11, reimbursement to County of Santa Barbara for professional services to complete the evaluation of community choice energy.
I think we'll need a comment from Mr. Four, so come on up. As he's coming up, Mr. Dominguez, let us know why you need to pull that.
So I'll start with a question of Mr. Four, and that's just regarding the where we are in terms of the contract. Is it possible to stop the contract at this point if council so desires, or are we already locked into paying this money?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I'm not exactly sure where the consultant is, although they are only a couple of weeks in. So how far they've gotten through the scope, I'm not sure. I know that they're in their preliminary stages. I think if we were to stop, we would probably just owe a prorated portion of whatever work they've completed at this point. I'm sure we can negotiate that.
They're working on basically 3 different studies, right? One for, I guess, the county plus municipalities, and then just the county unincorporated, and then the part that we're responsible for is just for the city of Santa Barbara?
That's correct.
Okay. And the company PEA that we're using, it seems like they actually buy or execute power purchases. So does that make them potentially a biased party? Or are there any concerns that we have about that?
Well, initially, PEA did not bid on the county's technical feasibility study because the county had a prohibition on the technical study author doing subsequent work for a CCA if we were to form up. So we didn't want a consultant to say, yes, it's feasible, now bring us on board and we'll help you implement. In this case, when we came to council in October, we said that there were 3 or 4 primary drivers of infeasibility, most notably the renewable energy prices and financing structure. At that case, council felt, I think at staff's recommendation, that what we really needed was a player in the arena outside of the theoretical, and so that's why we approached PEA.
So they're able to share the data they have. It says they represent 8 of the 9 existing CCEs, so they're able to use that data in the study?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so you're good with...
So at this point, we'll go to comment, and then I have some discussion, or what's the preferred process?
Well, I know that you're bringing an item next week on community choice energy, so we could just roll this item into that discussion. Would it make a difference if we didn't vote today on the contract and rolled it into the discussion on next week?
Madam Mayor, I think a 1-week delay wouldn't harm anybody.
Then we'll be ready to talk about it. Mr. Widrow, will you come up and make your comment, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tom Widrow, Santa Barbara City Watch. I believe it was last time it was on this agenda, the community choice aggregation. I came to the podium, made a comment that that we really should have gone by staff's recommendation at the time, which, if you remember, said it was financially unfeasible, at least if I remember correctly. And so there were other folks who came up to the podium and asked for another bite at the apple to go back and look at it again. So I guess our first and foremost it looked really unfeasible at the time. And I understand you're going to look at it again next week, so that's fine. I support Councilmember Dominguez if the idea of not spending any more money unless you have to. And then secondly, this is all about whether or not you get power that's better, qualitatively cleaner, I guess, and then at a lower price. So I know this council exercise its wisdom and make sure that you get one of those or both of those two things rather than necessarily put the power of energy distribution in the hands of a couple of non-governmental organizations, of which are local. I think that's a bad idea. So just really implore you to look at, we have if you're not saving any money and the energy is not demonstrably somehow qualitatively better, don't do it. Thanks.
Okay, well, you can come back next week because it looks like we're going to, do we need to vote on that separately that we're just?
So just, I guess, to cross the T's and dot the I's, I'd make a motion to ask staff to get into contact with either the county or the vendor, and if they haven't already started, ask them to hold off a week or whatever the city would have to do to avoid incurring any extra liability at this point. So that would be my motion, if there's a second.
Mr. Friedman, you have your light on?
I'll wait and see if there's a second.
I would second that, to have that be all part of the same discussion next week.
Very good. Discussion on the motion, Mr. Friedman?
So I just want to clarify. So basically contact the county, ask them to stop work for 1 week. I don't really see what 1 week is going to do if we're bringing this back next week. And there's a whole consultant that's looking at, my understanding is they're looking at information that is going to be useful for us, that is looking at if we're going to be independently going on our own and whether it's cost effective, or it's information that's going to be useful in determining whether or not we can go with Los Angeles or whether or not we do nothing. And being that that contractor is already going into a process, I think it's problematic to have them just stop for a week. Do we have any idea of what the cost would be for a week? Are we talking, I mean, we're talking $13,000 for the whole study, so we're talking maybe a couple $100 for a week. I don't want to ask them to stop work for a week if we can avoid it, but I am comfortable with bringing this item back to vote on next week so we can have a full discussion.
Mr. Four, I'm sorry, did you have a comment? Ms. Snedden?
I have a clarifying question. I think I'm confused. Is this the same long-term study, or is this a separate study that the county is doing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snedden, this is a follow-up study to our original technical feasibility study that Willdan and Internex and MRW peer-reviewed. So we brought those results in October. There were a couple of main drivers that were influencing the result, that there was a lot of interest and sort of scrutiny about, and so you charged us to go off and answer some of those questions and really get to, can we or a CCE compete with Edison in the long term? And that's what this will help answer.
Thank you. So I had a misunderstanding. So I would either rescind my second or vote against it.
Okay. So, well, she's taking her second away, so we'll take that motion off the floor unless there's another second to it. It's just a week. And
I have a long explanation. I was hoping to avoid that, although we now have an extra couple hours because of the withdrawal of the appeal. But basically, a lot of things have changed since the October vote. One, solar cells are now a lot more expensive because of the Trump tariffs. Two, Clean Power Alliance authorized for Santa Barbara and Ventura cities and counties to join their CCA. And three, we saw this example, unfortunately, recently, how cut off we can be from power and utilities with the floods and fires. So it took 5 months to get this study started, and the study is designed to find out if it's feasible to create our own local City of Santa Barbara, basically power purchasing agency, with only 50,000 or so households. It just doesn't seem feasible from the start. And the original study we did was several hundred pages. I think Appendix J, which dealt with just the city alone, was some 400 pages. So we, in October, voted to do the secondary study, and it would seem like a pretty minor thing to do back then. But again, because of these 3 significant changes, I think it's just throwing good money after bad because of the amount of work that was put into the primary study. And we just wanted a second opinion. And now we're asking a company that works with 8 out of the 9 CCEs in town to give us their unbiased opinion on whether we can or should do this. So to me, it doesn't seem like that information is going to break the tie. If they come back, and I think Mr. Friedman's optimistic that a week of work from a consultant's only going to be a couple $100, but whether they come back or not with a week, I guess the question I would pose is if a week doesn't matter, then why would we want to incur this expense rather than wait a week? The problem that I foresee is even if the study that involves a joint power authority comes back saying it's feasible, we've had really bad luck with joint powers and working with our neighbors on projects. Okay, we couldn't run a countywide library. We're getting sued by Goleta on 2 developments and a master plan. We tried to build a train. The 2006 101 in motion was, we passed $1 billion tax, partly to build 3 commuter lines. And what we have now is 1/2 of an Amtrak round trip retimed. So we spent $5 million plus, and we ended up with 1 retimed train. So here we are wanting to build a power company locally. Again, if the initial study that we spent, how much did we spend on the initial study?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, city spent $50,000.
So we spent $50,000 and the county put in?
All of the participating jurisdictions, I think in total, were about 2.25.
Okay. So we spent a lot of money on initial study, so these things have changed. We're using a group that's not exactly objective, and all I'm asking is for a week of time to decide whether we want to spend this $13,000 after 5 months of waiting. So it doesn't seem to me that that's an unreasonable request. If you were really concerned about that week, maybe a month ago you would have said, hey, let's hurry up and get this study done. But now that we're a week away from looking at an alternative, people are in a hurry.
Okay. Mr. Friedman, you have your light on.
I think what we're discussing here is actually agreeing with you, Councilmember Dominguez, but I'm a little confused on what the 101 trains has to do with this. But I think the consensus here is to hear this item on whether or not we're going to allocate the full $13,000 next week and put it into the item that you're bringing forward. From what I'm hearing, we can do that. My concern is that the county's already entered into this contract. We'd have to contact the county. The county would have to contact the contractor. They'd have to put stop work on it. And how much is that going to cost all the staff time to do that when we're talking about 1 week? And just to clarify, as you well know, the previous study is different than the one we're doing now. And I just want to make sure, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the previous study, one of the major reasons why it was infeasible is because it looked at the tri-counties from San Luis all the way down through Ventura County and all those jurisdictions. And one of the primary issues that came up was that we're a unique situation with Community Choice Energy in that North County and San Luis are PG&E and South County is SCE. This new study is focusing strictly on, for our part of it, the city of Santa Barbara. It's also looking county unincorporated area, so it's getting rid of a lot of those extra costs that are out there. That's what this study is looking at, is more focused on the SCE territory. Is that correct, Mr. Ford?
That's correct. This is wholly within SCE territory.
So this actually gets to your point that we do need information and things have changed. And in light of how things have changed, like you said, this new study is actually trying to get us more information on how things have changed. So I'm going to make a motion that we delay actually voting for the full $13,000 until next week and fold it into the discussion next week.
Well, I'll second that. And we'll give your ideas, Mr. Dominguez, a fair shake, your proposal next week and the contract. Ms. Sneddon.
I'm confused. It's the same motion, but is it? But it's not. But without this delay.
Without asking the county to delay any work that's being done on it.
My understanding is this is part of the due diligence that council asked you to follow through with, and I'd like to see the end of the report one way or the other. So whether it's this week or next week, we approve it either way.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Rouse?
Yeah, I'm fine with the motion as it stands. I voted against it in the first place because we did our due diligence and did a collaborative study with the other agencies and came back, we didn't like the answer. So we wanted a new answer and we started a new study. So I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to be on this one, but I will go along with Mr. Friedman's motion to table the discussion. And once again, what's going to happen between now and next week is, I think, immaterial.
So okay. And the motion, Madam Clerk, is to move item 11 to next week. Mr. Kalan looks like he wants to say something.
As long as we're going to get in trouble on parliamentary procedure, I might as well chime in. So the motion was to direct the county to stop work, or direct the consultant via the county to stop work. I hear Councilmember Friedman's motion as a substitute motion to simply continue approval of this contract expenditure for a week, so that it is timed, as you suggested, Mayor, with the deliberation on the Dominguez-Sneddon memo on community choice energy in LA County. So this is a substitute motion on the floor from Councilmember Friedman, and it is to continue until next week, but it doesn't include any direction to the county not to spend money.
That's right.
Yeah, but there's no contract approved, so if they're spending money, they're at their risk anyway.
Are we good? Okay. So will you call the... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if you were asking, are we good to me or to him?
Do you have anything else to say on the motion?
So we have an invoice in our package, so could you explain the role of this invoice from the county?
Or...
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, this is the procedure this was the payment mechanism that the county used for us to give our $50,000 contribution to the initial study. We needed something as backup to pay our contribution. It's true that this council has not approved that expenditure yet, but we moved forward based upon council direction in October to have this work begin. So that's where we are.
So are we on the hook at this point, unless we take action to tell the county and the vendor to stop work?
I think if the council were not to approve this expenditure, we would ask the vendor to stop work, tell us what they've, give us backup documentation for what they've spent already, specific to just task 4, the city's scenario, and then we would probably true up on that with the vendor.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Kalan.
It's a small point, but I want to be real clear about it, that the city's contracting procedures are really relatively strict, so that we many times will start people working, but they do so at their own risk. So if next week you reject this contract, the invoice doesn't get paid, the claim against the city would be that we had somehow authorized them to go forward. The law is real clear that we have to follow our contract procedures to make a valid contract. So that the invoice is in the packet doesn't mean that you have authorized us to pay it. Okay.
We'll look forward to a good discussion next week on the subject. And would you take the roll, a roll call, Madam Clerk?
You second.
Oh, sorry. So Friedman made the motion, and I made the second. Yes.
Oh.
I made a second on the first one. Thank you.
Right.
Somebody's got to keep score.
So, motion by Councilmember Friedman, second by Mayor Maria. Okay. Roll call. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Russ.
Aye.
Councilmember Hart is not present. Councilmember Siddon. Yes. And Mayor Maria.
Aye.
That
So
passes.
that's unanimous of everyone up here. Very good. So I need a motion for the remainder of the consent calendar, please.
I move we approve the rest of the consent calendar.
And seconded by Rouse. All in favor? Aye. That looked unanimous. Very good. So a report from the Finance Committee is next. Did you all meet today?
So we met, and the agenda item we discussed, we're going to have a presentation today in front of the full council, so I'll go ahead and let them speak.
Okay, very good. And next is a report from the Ordinance Committee.
Yes, today we heard staff report on the draft ordinance for ADUs and open public comment, and are anticipating continuing public comment into future meeting next week and taking action in the future.
And that's accessory dwelling unit, ADU, for people who might not know. The next item, Madam Clerk, number 17.
Item 17, subject fiscal year 2018 mid-year review.
Mr. Samario.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Bob Samario, Finance Director. I'm here with Ms. Jennifer Tomaszewski. She is our accounting manager, and we're going to share in this presentation. Just a quick background. First, we did go over this in detail with the Finance Committee a couple hours ago, so we are going to give you an abbreviated version of that report. But just for some context, we do bring to council every quarter a report to review with you how we're doing from a budget perspective. You know, we adopt the budget back in June, but you know, things change throughout the year, and we like to report to you how we're doing. Are we on track? Are we not? And if appropriate, we bring to you budget adjustments to true some things up for any costs that may have been unbudgeted, or just to kind of align the budget to what's actually happening. We do have some proposed budget adjustments, but we are not going to present them to you, to council, as we normally don't. We go through those with Finance Committee, but certainly if you have any questions on any of those, we're happy to answer those. So I'm going to start with the revenues in the general fund very briefly. You've heard of revenues already in detail at the budget work session. We'll talk a little bit about general fund expenditures, and then enterprise funds as a group. And then, as indicated, we will not be covering the proposed budget adjustments. So I'm going to cover the three large revenues in the general fund, the first being the sales and use taxes. And as you can see on the table, it indicates that we are slightly ahead of budget at mid-year. And now, just to kind of orientate you to the schedule here, the first column of numbers represents what we call the year-to-date budget. That has been essentially adjusted for the most part for seasonal variations. Our revenues don't come in straight line every month or throughout the year. So we look back over a 3-year period and come up with an average of how that has come in, and we established that year-to-date budget based on those numbers. So it's not just 50%. It's based on what's really transpired over the last 3 years on average. But in comparing to that, for sales and use tax, you can see, again, we're very close to budget. I will tell you that these numbers do not reflect what transpired in December and January, the two disasters. So we do believe that, at least for sales taxes, that we, by the end of the year, will have an impact and will be below budget by some $200,000 because of that. But it also depends on how we do the rest of the year in terms of growth with our sales taxes. Property tax, you can see, is pretty strong. It's at about $430,000 over budget at mid-year. We do expect that we're going to be ending the year at about $600,000 over budget, primarily because we did so well last year. We exceeded our expectations last year, which is what we used to build this year's budget on. And so we ended up with we were basically $600,000 over budget last year. So we're basically the same $600,000 this year. We could do better if we have a higher than expected growth. We plan on about a 5.5% growth this year. So to the extent we do better than that, it will bring in more revenues above budget. And then the last one I want to mention is TOT. Again, you can see that this is through December 31st, but it really only includes receipts for activity through November. So it doesn't include what happened in December, because we get that in January. So we know we had an impact in December. In fact, our TOT revenues were down about 25% for the month of December, which we got in January, so it's not reflected here. But we also know that in January, it flipped. We ended up with about a 22%. I mentioned 19% in Finance Committee, but that was factored other things. But in terms of real growth, the month of January was up 22% for obvious reasons. Folks who were displaced, evacuated. We filled up all the local hotels, so we saw tremendous growth in that month. which virtually offset the loss in December. So we, from a budgetary perspective, those, through January 31st, we're basically on track with budget. I've heard anecdotally that the month of February is going to be pretty strong, so we're anticipating, better than sort of expected growth in February. And I'm just going to mention one here. All these variances are fairly small, but I want to just mention that the third one there, intergovernmental revenues. It's a little bit of a misnomer. These are the revenues primarily we get from various fire agencies when we respond to mutual aid calls. As you know, it's been a very busy year, and obviously with the Thomas Fire, our fire folks were heavily involved in that. We get reimbursed for all those overtime costs and also for the use of any equipment, and there's also actually a little administrative overhead that they include within that. So when we look at the fire department, you'll see that we're well over budget on the expenditure side because of those overtime costs, but they're going to be reimbursed and will continue to be reimbursed. This year so far, we've received about $1.2 million through December 31st. We budgeted $600,000 just because we don't know what's going to happen. So the revenues here in this line item will be pretty substantial, but not completely, but are offset by overtime costs. And let's see, community development, I wanted to mention just a couple here. They are interesting. The planning side of things are below budget. They're about 38% of budget at mid-year. But on the building side, primarily because of all the activity with ADUs, they are seeing a higher than expected revenues and activity. So they're about 56% of budget. On a net, they're going to probably be anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 over budget by year end. And then the last one I'll mention is just Parks and Recreation. Just because it's a big number, and this is really a seasonal thing. By the end of the year, we'll see that normalize. A lot of their camps and the like occur in the summer, so the first part of the year, and it tails off in the second half of the year. So unless there are any questions, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Tomaszewski, and she'll cover general fund expenditures and enterprise funds.
Questions? Ms. Tomaszewski, thank you.
Let's see if I can reach this. Okay. So as Mr. Samario stated, I'm Jennifer Tomaszewski, and I will be going through, first I'll be going through the general fund expenditures. And this first slide is listed all the general fund departments. And the main takeaway from this slide is this number right here, the $1.2 million. As of mid-year, excuse me, we have about a $1.2 million savings in actual expenditures compared to the year-to-date budget. And I'm going to come back to this number, but I just wanted to quickly mention that as Mr. Samario was stating on the mutual aid revenues, here's where we see the other half of that. This is the mutual aid overtime for the mutual aid activity, and this is almost all related to that mutual aid activity. So typically, the department budgets conservatively on the mutual aid activity, as it's hard to project what's going to happen from year to year. So we typically bring back another adjustment to true up that mutual aid activity at year end. So even though it's showing $1 million upside down now, we know that we have the revenues to cover those additional costs. And at year end, we will increase the budgets to recognize that difference. So what that means to the bottom line. So basically right now we see about a $1.2 million savings. If we were to back out that mutual aid activity, that would be about a little over $2 million savings. And as we project out costs for the remainder of the year, we're looking at about a $2 to $4 million savings by year end. Just to put some context to that, in the last couple years, we had savings of about $7 million in 2016, our fiscal year 16. Last year, that savings was about $4 million. So, and the main factor there has been these vacancies that have been throughout the general fund department. So what this tells us is those positions are slowly getting filled over time, so that gap is closing, but there are still vacancies out there. So next I wanted to briefly go through the enterprise funds, and we did spend a lot more time going through these with Finance Committee, so I'm only going to talk about water. So right now we see at mid-year water revenues are about $4 million above budget, and the main driver here relates to the different tiers that are used in the rate model to project out what those budgets are going to be. And what we're seeing is those Tier 3 revenues, which are significantly higher than the Tier 1 and Tier 2, are creating the majority of that increase over budget. On the expenditure side, we see about a $2.9 million savings, and the single largest item in these savings relates to the desalination facility. When it went online, there were some bugs that needed to be worked out with the new facility, so there were some intermittent closures. That's no longer anticipated for the rest of the year. So there will also be a large debt service payment that will also be delayed until fiscal year 19 with the delays in the project. So I just quickly wanted to point out on the wastewater fund, we see a variance, an increase of actual costs from prior year of about 17.5%. And the main, if you're looking at that, just the actual costs, it looks like costs have gone up, but really there's those one-time capital outlay transfers that really skew those numbers. So operations aren't necessarily increased, it's those one-time costs. And we'll see that on the next slide with the airport. It's the same thing here. We see about a 24% increase, but it's those one-time capital outlay transfers that are impacting those percentages. And then lastly, I just wanted to go through the Gulf Fund. So right now we see revenues are showing about $120,000 below budget. This is mostly related to the Thomas Fire, the impacts of the Thomas Fire. Staff estimate that gap will close to about $50,000 by year end. And then lastly, on the expenditure side, the $180,000, this is mostly related to staffing savings. So that's it for my portion of the presentation. And just to recap, we request that you accept the interim financial statements for the second quarter ended December 31st, and that you approve the proposed budget adjustments. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council? Do I have a motion? A motion from Rouse and a second from Mr. Friedman. Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next item is a drought update. And for those of you in the audience who didn't hear, the land use appeal is taken off the calendar for today. So this will be our final item before we go into a closed session. So would you read the item, Madam Clerk? Yeah.
Certainly. Item 18, Stage 3 Drought Update.
Mr. Hagmark, nice to see you.
Thank you. Me too. Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to give our monthly drought update. Today we'll be covering the drought status, demand status for the community, water supply strategy, water supply status, and water conservation. So as you might predict, it's been a very dismal rainfall year. Gibraltar with just almost 4.5 inches of rain, or 23% of normal. Cachuma 4.16 inches, or 30% of normal. And then downtown Santa Barbara with 2.42 inches, or 18% of normal. I did quickly look up for Santa Barbara. The lowest rainfall year I could find was 6.4 inches. So basically we need to get about 4 inches of rain to break even with the worst year, which is completely possible in March. And the high pressure ridge that has been pushing storms around us has finally broken down. So I'm optimistic we'll see something. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer for March, but optimistic we'll see something more than we've seen in the last 2 months. As for the drought monitor, they have moved up the significance for our area. It is now severe for our region of California. We had been in a moderate stage, which we had been talking about the localities of Santa Barbara County and the fact that we really didn't benefit as much from last year's rainfall, but it still remains an emergency situation for us and a very significant situation. As far as rainfall predictions, it's still predicting below average rainfall for the remainder of our rainfall period. Conservation for January was at 25%, which is still pretty remarkable. January was incredibly dry except for that January 9th storm, and warm, as you may recall. So we are seeing more water usage than we typically see in January. Our overall conservation, though, for the last 12 months is at 39%. As you might expect, with more water usage in January than we anticipated, revenues came in strong. We were seeing more Tier 2 and Tier 3 water sales than we had predicted in the model. As far as our water supply strategy, we do go through this on a regular basis, but we can just stop and look. Typically, this graph goes out 6 years, and we've continued to add to this because this drought won't go away. But the whole point of this is to show how we transition through our different supplies and how we are looking out into the future to address our needs. We are currently in year 7 of this drought cycle, 2018, with planned use of desal, water purchases, state water, Gibraltar water, a little bit of Kachuma carryover, which is really a transfer of water from Montecito, and then a Kachuma allocation, which we're planning to use this year. When we look out ahead, we do have a water shortage in 2020. Our plan is to come back in May when this water year or rainfall year is over and talk about how we anticipate addressing that. On the table will be obviously a discussion about desal and the cost of additional expansion of that, along with additional conservation measures that we could potentially look at. So we want to look at a suite of different options in May. As for Gibraltar, it's currently at 40% of capacity at just over 2,000 acre feet of water. We did get about 500 acre feet of inflows from that January 9th storm, but I'm afraid not much of that is water. And they've had a few water quality tests come back, and the water quality is really poor. Like we thought the water quality was poor after the Zaka fire. This seems to be setting a new benchmark and doesn't appear to be settling out or cleaning up. So we have stopped diversions from the lake at this point, hoping that things will improve. But at this point, it really need some continuous flows coming into the reservoir to actually spill and pass some of the organics that are in this lake downstream. This is a little graphic of the Kachuma storage. Did we skip a slide here? No. Nope. This is the graphic. We've showed this before, showing the various stages with the city declared stage 1 in February 2014, stage 2 May of 2014, and then stage 3 ultimately in May 2015. We did see last year a little bump in inflows into Kachuma, which is great. And then again, starting to come down again. It's not likely we're going to see a significant jump this year, but I think it's kind of shows you that we are right back in this area where we were in 2014 when the emergency was really taking hold here. As far as Kachuma storage, it's at 39% of capacity, just over 75,000 acre feet. We received about 600 acre feet of inflow, and because of the larger mass there, we didn't note a significant drop in the water quality there. The current allocation for this year was 40%, and unless we get some substantial inflows, we don't anticipate any additional allocations going out. The city's available supply from Kachuma is about 7,160 acre feet of that 75,000. And unfortunately, we're to that point again of talking about putting the barge back out. And there's a timeline, and I have some more information to share on that. Just go here. So this is a graphic. This is a kind of a planning level graphic that we're putting together. But basically wanted to point out, as I just mentioned, we're at 75,000 acre feet in the reservoir. We need to install the piles for the pipeline before it gets to 64,500. So we have roughly 10,000 acre feet of buffer in there right now. We anticipate we'll be at 64,000 right around the August timeframe. So that's when we need to make that decision. And then following that at 39,000 is when we need to actually have the barge installed. We don't expect that until next summer. And then the other site we'd move to, which is at when the reservoir reaches 22,000 acre feet. I did have some pictures just to remind the council of what everything looks like. This is looking southeast. There's the intake tower. There is site 1, which is the closer location, and then site 2, which is in a deeper part of the lake. Requires quite a bit more piping to get to there. This is turning around and facing more of a northwestern look. And again, there is site 1, where the barge was just a few years ago, and then site 2, where it was in 2016. And then here's where our state water comes through, and that's why it's important that we continue to be able to move not only the city's Kachuma water, but any state water that we're bringing through. And then here's some great pictures. I wish these were renderings, but these are actual pictures from the last round. And you can see why it's important that we get in there in the August timeframe and set the piles. It's basically we'll have just enough water in the lake to be able to float in there. And once the water depth basically turns into mud, you really can't get a vehicle out there to place the piles. So they'll place the piles. And you can just kind of see how the pipeline runs through there, and then ultimately how it can dry out, and that's our only lifeline to moving water out of the lake. Imported water, we continue to maximize our available capacity in the State Water Project to deliver water, which is around 280 acre feet a month. The city's imported water available is about 1,600 acre feet in Kachuma and 1,000 acre feet in San Luis Reservoir. We were, as you may recall, wanting to make sure we got enough water out of San Luis in case it spilled. That's no longer a threat. DWR allocation right now is at 20%. We are anticipating it might actually go down because the rainfall in Northern California has been so dismal. DWR is actually contemplating backing away from the allocation that they've given so far. So we're keeping an eye on that. To give you a kind of perspective, there is an index of weather stations in Northern California and the Sierras. The index, kind of again, a pooling of a bunch of these weather stations typically gets about 50 inches a year. That's the average rainfall. They've gotten 20. So they're about 30 inches below the average rainfall. And so that is what's driving a lot of this. The other factor is Oroville. As you remember the spillway issues last year, they are still doing construction, and because of that, they have brought down the lake. It's now at 40% of capacity, so that they didn't want to spill in any way this year, and so they've kind of taken away a buffer going into, unfortunately, if we're going into a reoccurrence of this drought. So the city currently is pursuing 1,500 acre feet of water purchases this year. We have contacted CCWA, and they are looking on our behalf. We are looking both several different options, but one, again, approaching rice farmers in Northern California if the water is available, potentially purchasing that water. And, of course, there's the conveyance losses of moving that water through the Delta. And we're also looking at transfers, but unfortunately that comes with the return component. And then, of course, approaching other CCWA members to see if anybody else is interested in selling any water. Right now, the city has about 3,300 acre feet of water debt. Groundwater, our groundwater basins are currently all resting. There's really no new information here. We do turn them on frequently to make sure everything's still operating, but for all intents and purposes, they are resting. The desal plant continues to plug away and in full operation. We have been working with IDE to try and set up a public tours, basically kicking that off with an open house. Right now we're tentatively talking about April, but it's really on IDE to make sure that we can do it in a safe manner, and so we're working closely with them. Again, this is kind of some of the challenges that we struggle with because we needed this facility up and running to meet our needs in the drought. And of course, we didn't have the time to go through and work out these, public tours elements. And so we're working out of that backwards, trying to make sure we can do it in a safe manner. But we do recognize that this is an important facility to the city, and there's a lot of interest in getting in and seeing how it works. As I reported last time, fresh off the press, we did not make the initial funding list for the DSAL grant. However, we did submit a rather lengthy response to DWR on that matter. It really came down to them disqualifying our project because we didn't commit to operating it all the time, which wasn't a requirement of the grant application. And really kind of an odd one. So with the help of Senator Jackson, we have been pushing back pretty hard, and they're going to take another look at our proposal again and see, hopefully they'll come to the right conclusion. As for water conservation, before we jump into this...
Mr. Hagmark, Mr. Rouse has a question.
When you were done with your part, I was going to ask a question about something.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add just before we jump into water conservation. We have been contacted by a few customers related to high water usage during the Thomas Fire. It runs the gamut as to, some people turned their sprinklers on and left. Not what we're wanting to see. There were some cases where the fire department actually was staged at their house, using their water to protect the community surgically. In those cases, it's just like pulling water from fire hydrant. We are working with those homeowners if the fire department agrees that they were using their water. But just wanted to make sure that council knew, the water rate funds that we collect under Prop 218, we cannot just be granting anybody, a relief from their water bill if they made some poor decisions. Some were also affected by power outages, and their sprinkler timers went off and watered more frequently than they normally would have. So just making you aware of that situation and how staff is responding to those. So that ends my comments, and I was happy to answer yours.
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Hagberg, going back to the water supply strategy budget, and we've got that at what our normal budget would be in normal water usage years, but then our actual usage, that line is somewhere far below, of course, where we've got our graphs, right? What is our annual average usage in terms of acre feet in the last few years? About?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we are now right below 10,000 acre feet.
And then what is the projected release for the for NIMS, for the fish?
It varies. It's, if I remember right, it was somewhere around 300 acre feet a month.
A month, okay.
So is that 3,600 acre feet a year?
Okay.
Yeah, that's been some of the. It's supposed to be much less, but that has been kind of the dialogue back and forth between NIMS. It's supposed to be 30 acre feet a month, but we've struggled to get NIMS to come around to that change.
And actually, that's where I was going with my question. Is there, in fact, a conversation? Are we engaged with our federal officials and whatnot? Because there's obviously environmental consequences to producing water from desal, so as well as trying to preserve whatever the biologics are, which I'm not really clear on what the biologics are up there anymore, if there are, in fact,
yes,
animals.
Yes, there are impacts, and that's exactly it. We've been helping the Bureau prepare for a discussion with NIMS on several topics, really ranging about releases for fish.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Go ahead, please.
Yep.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Madeline Wood. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor, and today I'm here to announce the recipient of the 2017 Water Hero Award. So this award is given out every year, and it highlights individuals, businesses, and organizations that go above and beyond in their water conservation efforts and serve as an example of resource efficiency for our community. Prior recipients include the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Eucalyptus Hill HOA, Santa Barbara City College, the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors, the Tobes Group, and Dennis Allen Construction. I'm pleased to announce that the 2017 Water Hero Award recipient is Mission Linen Supply. Mission Linen has been a member of the Santa Barbara community since 1930. They operate 44 locations in 5 different states, but Santa Barbara is their home to their main headquarters and 2 of their plants. And you may recognize the Queen of the Missions there in their logo. It's always fun to see that reminder of home when traveling in other states. In Santa Barbara, they process approximately 145,000 pounds of laundry each week, which makes water an important part of their daily operations. In 2017, Mission Linen incorporated new methods to better recycle and reuse their water. One of their efforts includes capturing water from their cooling towers. They have also worked with their suppliers to adjust washing formulas, which has resulted in significant water savings, as well as other savings such as reduced salt for their softening process. Mission has been able to reclaim 34% of the water used in their operations, and they use this water to wash additional loads before releasing the water to the wastewater system. Overall, these changes have resulted in over 5 million gallons of savings each year. And when you compare laundering at Mission Linen versus taking that same load and washing it in a residential washer, their process uses about half the amount of water. I wanted to end with a quote from John Ross, who's the president and CEO. We're honored to have our efforts recognized by the city of Santa Barbara, and as we continue pursuing new and better ways to conserve our planet's valuable resources, we hope to inspire others to do the same. The city is pleased to recognize the contributions of Mission Linen Supply, and for more information on our current and past Water Heroes, including really great videos of all of the recipients, you can visit our website. That concludes our presentation, and Mr. Hagmark and I are available for any questions.
Mr. Dominguez?
I have a question regarding conservation in terms of the lawn watering ban that we had imposed a while back. Where are we with potentially needing that? How much water would that save us?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, that's something that I think we'd bring back in May. I don't have that information in front of me today, but certainly will be something we're talking about with all the different options for reducing and or increasing our supplies.
So if we end up with a pretty dry March, would it be possible to bring it in April?
We could, I think, to bring a complete discussion back, I think that we could bring pieces back, but I don't know if that would be beneficial for the discussion. I think we're focusing on May. I'm getting some costs back from ID for desal, and I've kind of focused, they're getting their costs back to me in April, so I'm kind of pulling all of it together for a May discussion. And I think we have the time. I mean, we're looking at 2020 when we have the shortage, so we do have some time to really work with the community on this still.
So you're suggesting that we might have more supply and then not have to tinker with the demand?
Potentially, yeah. There is some options. One of the things that we're exploring with the desal plant that we have, each one of the modules is capable of additional capacity. So it works out to about 200 acre feet additional capacity per treatment train that can be added on at what I hope would be a pretty nominal price. The last pricing they gave us to do that was around $2 million to add that 625 acre feet of additional capacity. So kind of bring that back and take a look at what that looks like. Cost for that additional supply is pretty minimal, so maybe that would be a productive choice.
Economic costs, not environmental.
Correct.
Because the environmental cost, it's a double win with conservation because you're producing less environmental harm with the lawn watering, and then the electricity that desal uses is very intense. So that would be just part of the equation.
What we're also trying to do too is, and I think Councilmember Sneddon has brought this up, is maybe this is just the new normal, and we're trying to adapt to that new normal and what that looks like instead of, just this drought. And maybe that's kind of the focus, is what is the long-term gain that we need to try and prepare for. And so that's going to be part of the discussion in May.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Walker filled out a slip, but he left a message, dry time, he writes. So, Mr. Walker, if you're out there, thanks for that. Yeah, it's very dry. So, I did hear, I don't see any other lights on, so I'll ask it. Did you talk about snowpack in the rest of the state? I heard someone saying it's not a good picture either, right? Is that...
Madam Mayor, yes, the challenge has been, it's up until recently, it's been really warm, and so what moisture they did get did not fall in the form of snow, which ultimately brings us water later into the summer and kind of feeds all of our reservoirs. So that is the double whammy to it. To this, not only is it dry, but then it's been unusually warm in the Sierras.
So our message to the public is to continue conserving?
Yes, continue doing what you're doing.
Okay. Councilmember Snedden?
I just wanted to ask you, you have such a nice update on El Estero and reclaim recycled water, and Hillary Hauser with her rebranding idea of not calling it wastewater, but resource recovery or something like that. Could you just give all of us a brief update on recycled reclaimed water and how that is?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snedden, at the last Water Commission meeting, we had a very nice discussion on the El Estero Wastewater Master Plan, basically looking out for the next 25 years at what capital projects needed to occur. And then we were also talking about rates with that. And Hillary Hauser from Heal the Oceans came forward to request that the Water Commission and eventually the council entertain renaming the wastewater treatment plant to reflect what it actually does for this community, which is to recover both energy and water and other resources. And so it really, I think it hits the nail on the head that it's something we're definitely doing, and staff is digging into that right now, and we're planning to bring it back to Water Commission to begin that discussion in April. And so we think it is definitely reflects the times, and I think it's important to stop talking about it as waste. There really is just one water, and there is no new water on this planet. It's all water that's been recycled, and trying to get the public to see that and embrace that. And again, the regulations for potable reuse, in particular the form that we have been looking at, they're still not there. They're probably 6 to 7 years out in developing those regulations, but it's never too early to start preparing the community for it and talking about it. We are also working with a consortium of other agencies to present to the state board, here's how potable reuse would work for our community, so that when the state board is developing those regulations, they can have our concept in mind. So.
Okay. Mr. Friedman?
I just, following up on that conversation, and thank you for raising that issue. And I took a tour of El Estero, and I want to thank Mrs. Bjorkquist there for giving me the tour. And if you haven't been there, or you haven't been there in a while, I encourage all council members to take the tour. It's fascinating on what we're doing, and it puts a lot of this into perspective, especially as we're looking forward, the capital projects that need to get done, and also the issue of direct reuse and indirect reuse and reclaiming water, and just to see how those separate systems function it was really, I just want to say it was really cool to see all that. So I appreciate the tour and the discussion we've had today. Thank you.
Thanks. So we don't need to take a motion. This was just an update for us. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in May, and we'll pray for the April showers, right? So the next item is council member assignment reports. So if you've been going to your committees or attending events, Mr. Friedman.
I attended Central Coast Water Authority last week, and we talked about most of it on the previous item, but the two things, one is the state water allocation. The percentage that was discussed was actually reducing it to 10% from the current 20%. And the other item that we discussed is discussion is still ongoing with the county, Central Coast Water Authority, and Department of Water Resources on potentially reassigning the contract from the county to Central Coast Water Authority.
That's a big one. Okay, Mr. Dominguez.
I attended Transportation and Circulation Committee, and they had two presentations of interest. One of them was the Vision Zero plan and the committee voted to move that forward, and Vision Zero, as you probably all know, is a plan to have 0 traffic fatalities. And they also voted on widening the sidewalks near State Street and the 101 underneath the bridge to make it more pedestrian friendly and more inviting to create a smoother transition between Lower State and Mid State Street.
Thanks. Councilmember Snedden?
I also accidentally attended the Transportation Circulation meeting. That was really interesting. And anyway, that was by accident. I attended a Water Commission meeting, and I think we had a great summary of that. There were also updates to El Estero facility plan and resource recovery, and they authorized Dan Henschke and Kelly Dyer to be the Kachuma contract representatives, which I have a high level of confidence in. Attended ribbon cutting and Coda Bike Lane. Big supporter of that project. Went to 2 CCRB special meetings. I can't report out; those were closed session, but there was good progress being made on the items being considered. COME meeting. Let's see. Just really confirming that the modeled forecast for August, looking at reinstalling the piles to get ready for the barge. And then Ordinance Committee we already reported on. And the MTD board meeting, it was not one of the main topics of discussion, but something that came up is how difficult it is to hold on to labor, mechanics of heavy equipment, but also drivers. And it's across the state, people moving out of state, not just because of housing. I don't know, it's just a recurring issue of transportation. It's sort of ironic that MTD employees have difficulty commuting to their location to work. But there was some discussion about maybe working with City College or different organizations. There just are not enough trained workers in heavy equipment and in drivers. And something else they brought up is they're updating their alcohol and drug plans, is that opioids are a major epidemic that are affecting workers at all levels. So that was updated in their plan too, so as an aside.
Thank you. I did hear there's a shortage of mechanics in general. Yes. So
they're said across the state, so just keeping that in mind.
Okay. Last night was the West Side Community Group. It's our West Side Neighborhood Association. I'd like to thank, and Mr. Casey, some of our city employees did a really good job, so that you know, Andrew Bermond, Tava Ofstranger, and Sergeant Brian Jensen, and they were all there to talk about the new commercial cannabis ordinance and also the noise ordinance, which has a lot of neighborhood interest. And they did a really good job for us. So just to let you know, as mayor, I accompanied Council Member Michael Bennett to the Low Sand meeting. And Michael Bennett was very well spoken, asking that Joint Powers Authority to approve the what we're calling the commuter train. Yes, we can do better on it. But that was really big news, as you saw in the newspaper reports, that we'll have a train timed coming from Ventura County to Santa Barbara. It's larger than that, but that's our interest, right, is getting our workers up here. The Youth Council met yesterday, and they will be participating in something called the March for Our Lives to address gun violence, and in particular as a response to the Florida shooting of the high school students. And they're working with the Coalition Against Gun Violence, and they might do a speak out. I attended a luncheon of Women United. It's a new group formed through the United Way, and they're focusing on literacy. And then the downtown Santa Barbara breakfast was just really nice last week. Our downtown is coming together. You wanted to say something about that too?
Just quickly, I forgot to mention that I also joined the Bucket Brigade this last weekend and digging out oak trees. And I think it was Abe Powell who said you dig one shovel and then you realize how much mud there actually is. So I'd encourage anyone to do that. But also there are tons and tons, literally, of fertile topsoil that they're looking for locations of places to bring. Not debris, not contaminated, but fertile, rich with ash, really good topsoil, just to put that out there.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. We'll be going into closed session. Would you read that, please, Madam Clerk?
Certainly. Item 20, conference with city attorney, anticipated litigation as described in agenda item 20.
Okay. We'll be going into closed session, and I don't think we'll be reporting back, so we'll adjourn from there. Thank you.